Welcome back, everyone. I am your host, Chase Tuning, and this is your weekly source for inspiring content from people who are putting a purpose to their passion and truly living a life ever forward. This is Ever Forward Radio. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes of today's interview. This is going to be with Rob Harsh, and we are going to be talking specifically about transformation through adventure. And wow, Chase, that was a really corny way to say adventure. Transformation through adventure. There we go. Some of the key takeaways are going to be personal growth and transformation through mindfulness. Now, if you have listened to any other podcast I have produced, any other interview that I have had with any other guest, it all comes down to mindfulness, everybody. And the story you're going to hear from Rob, mindfulness is paramount, all right? We're going to be diving into adventure and embracing adversity and how he, as an adventurer, as a coach, and more importantly, a cancer survivor, how he has been leading and guiding people in business, outdoor adventure, personal growth for over 2 decades now. One of the key takeaways in his bio that I received ahead of time was that he helps adaptive athletes and injured veterans in the outdoors. And as an Army veteran myself who has gone through a significant series of injuries and knows what it's like to not be able to do the things that you want to do or used to be able to do, like get outdoors, climb a mountain, whatever physical activity and exercise looks like for you, going through a significant injury, and certainly like Rob, going through cancer, it really does put a lot of things into perspective and forces that mindfulness to pivot. You have to shift your mindset. You have to shift how you look at the world and how you can still accomplish those things that you want to accomplish, knowing now that you physically are different. It doesn't mean you can't. It just means things are going to be a little bit different. So Rob was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer and given only a 4% chance of survival. And he took matters into his own hands. He, as you will learn, went about it in a very naturopathic way. And within about a year, he completely cured himself and has been in remission ever since. These days, Rob is a professional coach and expert in supporting people making positive shifts in their lives. And he helps them by overcoming adversity in pretty much any area of life and helps them discover how to live in alignment with who they authentically are. This is going to be your takeaway for this episode, everybody. This is going to be a message that hopefully you can learn how to live in alignment with who you authentically are, your true self, and accomplish the things that you want to accomplish despite whatever adversity, despite whatever BS, despite whatever limiting belief, despite whatever the world has in store for you. You can get through it. Like I always say, embrace the suck, embrace the adversity, transform through adventure. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rob Harsh. And we're going to jump right in here with Mr. Rob Harsh, which we're talking about on the pre-recording here, that harsh is not exactly what it sounds like. It means something a little bit less harsh in another language, right?
Yeah, after many years, I learned that harsh in Sanskrit actually means joy or happiness, which I find suits me much more.
So I'm talking to either Rob Harsh or Rob Joy, depending on if this is in English or Sanskrit, whatever way we transcribe this. Rob, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Welcome to Ever Forward Radio. Who is Rob Harsh? Please introduce yourself to the audience here.
Great to be here, Chase. I think of myself just as an ordinary guy who's had an opportunity to experience some extraordinary things in my life and learn some really great lessons through that. I go back 20 years in this world of kind of getting out there and being an athlete and in this world of adventure. As a youngster, I always loved the outdoors, and the outdoors was kind of my church. And I always found that there was all these amazing, beautiful lessons that one can learn in the outdoors. So, I spent a lot of my younger years pursuing travel, pursuing adventure, and pursuing sport. I did a lot of pretty insane, by typical standards, insane endurance racing. I did a lot of ultra running. I did a lot of multi-day expedition racing. As a climber, kayaker, mountain biker, kind of you name it. I don't think of myself necessarily as an adrenaline junkie. I really, went into the outdoors, to find peace and fulfillment in my life, and to test myself and really learn how to overcome adversity in my life. Life is a full circle journey, and it's funny. I always talk about life as, you go through life and you pick up these puzzle pieces. It's like it's a big jigsaw puzzle. And the big secret is you don't know what the picture of the jigsaw puzzle is. You pick up these pieces and you're kind of like, wow, that's a belly button. That's an eyebrow. I don't know what that is. And you don't know where these pieces go. But, as you get older, you tend to figure out where these pieces go. And this bigger picture starts to come into view. And so all these things that I did earlier in my life were preparing me to overcome something much greater in my life. So, later in my life, I took some chances. I kind of hit a dead end in my life, when I hit my 40s, and I decided I just really want to go out and pursue my passion in life.
What is your passion in life, Rob?
My passion in life, I think at this point, is to really be of service to others. And I really believe that the outdoors is an amazing classroom. There's so much that we can experience in the outdoors. So I really enjoy taking people into the outdoors and allowing them to experience themselves on another level. I enjoy helping them step beyond themselves and see that they have a capacity that is greater than they thought they had.
I think that's definitely one of the biggest things that stood out to me when I came across you and your biography here is about just the outdoors and the sense of adventure. And I didn't share this with you earlier, but for a lot of my audience, that I came from adventure. I came from a life outdoors. I grew up on about 200 acres of just mountains down in Southwest Virginia. And I didn't know what it was like to not be outside every day, all day. I didn't know what it was like for me, my brother, my sister, to just be living an adventuresome life, and to kind of echo what you're talking about is just getting out into the unknown and getting out into exploring the creek across the street, and exploring these mountains, whether it's building a fort or just crossing over the next hill. It was this sense of adventure that just piqued our interest and just, I think, defined my childhood. So what is it about the outdoors and the sense of adventure that you're able to share with others who maybe aren't there, who don't have that curiosity and aren't really intrigued the same way you and I and a lot of my listeners may be about this unknown?
Well, I think you hit it. Like, you described it as the ability to experience the unknown. I mean, anything can happen in the outdoors. I mean, you're out in the elements and you got to deal with weather, you got to deal with wildlife. I take trips all around the world, so we got to deal with, the culture of the places that we go to. So a lot of things happen on our trips that are that are really unknown, and it's an opportunity to really test ourselves. I mean, I just view the world as an enormous playground. And, it's been the great love of my life to get out and play all over the world. And, there's something about just getting out and treating the world as a playground, because it gives you permission to fail. And I think that's one of the greatest lessons I've learned through everything I've done in my life, that when you fail, it's an opportunity to really learn. I mean, I've learned so much more from my failures than I have from my successes. And, that's something I really appreciate about getting out on adventures in the outdoors.
What's one of your biggest failures you've experienced while in the outdoors? Because I'm sure a lot of us can certainly think of an example or relate to something in the real world, so to speak, whether it's something in your professional life, your personal life. But like you said, it is really different when you're facing elephant, not the elephants. Well, maybe you face an elephant. I don't know. Your bio is pretty extensive. When you're facing the elements, when you're facing Mother Nature, the heat, the cold, what is the difference in failing out there versus failing here where it's safe?
I think you learn through failure that you can embrace your fear. You can step into your fear and you can survive. Fear is an illusion. We kind of, a lot of times in our lives, we're afraid of certain things in our lives, and we kind of we tend to push those things away because they make us uncomfortable. We like our safe little comfortable zone. And when we bump up against our fears, sometimes it's uncomfortable for us. But when you go out into the outdoors and you can really test yourself and learn that you can step into your fear and it won't destroy you, and that you can succeed and fail, and still wake up the next day and still push on. I think that's a really wonderful lesson. So I think one of the biggest failures that I learned from is many years ago. I did an adventure with this really famous guy. He's an amazing man. His name's Eric Weinmeier, and he was the first blind man to reach the summit of Mount Everest in 2001.
Wait, did you say blind man?
Yeah. Eric's this amazing.
No way! Wow, what an expedition that had to have been.
Yeah, he's an amazing guy. He's pretty well known. He's written several books. He's had some, he's made some films, and he's really just dedicated his life to helping others. So I had the great honor, about 15 years ago now, to do some of these, a couple of these multi-day adventure races with Eric. Eric kind of operates. He needs a team. So these adventure races are all kind of team based. There's usually 3 men and 1 woman on a team. And they compete together in all kinds of crazy disciplines. It's mountain biking, and it's kayaking, and it's climbing, and it's trail running, and whatever else is there. They just kind of throw things at you. So I engaged Eric in joining our team and competing in the toughest adventure race in the world at the time, which was called the Primal Quest, and it was a 10-day long 600-mile non-stop adventure through the Sierra Mountains of Nevada. And, we went out and prepared to work together as a team for over a year. And we did multiple trainings out in Colorado, where Eric had lived at the time. And then we did a practice race, and we did this practice race up in Greenland, which is by far one of my favorite destinations in the world. Greenland is so amazingly beautiful, and the scenery is just so stark. With it's ice and rock and water, and it's just an amazing place to visit.
Yeah, Greenland is really Iceland, and Iceland's kind of Greenland, right? Isn't that the Viking origin story? They wanted to throw people off so not everyone would come find this amazing land they discovered.
Yeah, that's the story exactly. We were actually at an island just off the coast of Greenland called Almasalik Island, and it was an adventure just to get there. It was an amazing adventure. And then this was a 5-day long race. And, this was just a race that was meant for us to practice. Me and the woman that I had raced with, Cami, for many, many years, had never worked with a blind person before. And then Eric and his teammate, Jeff Evans, who climbed Mount Everest with Eric, joined our team. So they had never done an adventure race before. So this was an opportunity for us, to really learn and work some things out before we went and did this, crazy big long race in California. And it turns out that, Greenland is just a very difficult terrain for a blind man. It's rocky.
For anyone, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, we were on this island that was just, a pile of rocks. It was all, huge granite cliffs, and there were some glaciers on the island. And but really, it was just all the slopes of all these peaks were all really talus rocks, which are these big, loose, jumbly rocks. And for Eric, that was, really difficult terrain. So, we did pretty well. We held our own for the first couple days, and then the third day was ended up being a longer day, and we were out probably 24 hours, and the terrain just ended up kind of wearing on him, and we had to come to a difficult decision on day 3, whether to continue forward in the race or to quit. And quitting was just not my vocabulary at that time in my life, and that was kind of the name of the game in these races, that you just keep putting one step in front of the other, and you don't stop.
Yeah, you don't strike me as the kind of guy who knows how to say quit or even knows what that means, especially not when you're leading a group of others. Yeah.
And, Eric's just, Eric always just, he surrounds himself with amazing people. So, quitting is not in his vocabulary either. But, we got to a point where we knew we had to preserve ourselves because this other big race was coming up in 6 weeks. And we went through, a lot of back and forth, as a team, should we do this? Should we do that? So it was a way for us to work out just all kinds of crazy stuff. We had to work out our systems for, leading Eric through different kinds of terrain. And, we had to work out, who was navigating and who was route finding. And, there's all these things that you do in an adventure race so you can be really efficient in the outdoors.
Yeah, any real team scenario, it's all about role delegation so that you're not stumbling over each other and you have a clear, devoted person in charge of every area of your mission, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You always try and assign people tasks. I was, for this race, I was the navigator, but we all worked together, because that was the beauty of the sport is you have the opportunity to work together. And there's always a point during these events where somebody's really hurting. And you're really going to support that one other person to get through that moment, get to the other side. So it was really hard for us to quit that race, but it ended up being a great godsend because we ended up learning so much more through failing to finish that race. And we actually ended up bonding and coming closer as a team because, we had to bump up against those fears. We had to bump up against the unknowns. And, each of us is on our own journey in life, but together, we're all on the same journey. We're all in the same boat. We're all trying to overcome the same things in life. So, we really bonded during that race. And then 6 weeks later, we came together to tackle this immense challenge, going through the Sierra Nevada mountains. And we end up finishing that race in 42nd place out of 80 teams. So we ended up beating like half the field. We took the full 10 days to do it. We finished maybe 3 hours before the deadline in that race, but it ended up being an incredible success. And I don't think, looking back at it now, that we would have been successful if we had not gone out first and failed.
Say that again. Walk us through what it's like to have this hindsight of knowing that you would not most likely have been as successful as you are now were it not for your previous failure or failures. Maybe unpack that a little bit, dig a little bit deeper. If you could please share that with the audience, because I know a lot of us, myself included, get caught up in the fear of failure. And that's one of, honestly, full disclosure, my biggest limiting beliefs is this fear of failing, this fear of not being good enough, or maybe when you do go through with something, it's not going to go as well as planned. But sometimes that's what needs to happen so that the next time you are successful. Walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, fear is kind of embedded in our consciousness, so, we're kind of, there's this natural fear, it's part of, who we are as human beings. There's physical fear, and then, there's all this emotional fear and all this, stuff that we deal with in this modern world. And it can be paralyzing. I've certainly experienced this a lot in my life, to kind of be paralyzed, and afraid of failure. But again, when you step into that fear and you go through that process of failing, you learn that fear can't hurt you. And that failure is actually a gift in disguise. And to me, that is the spice of life. That is what it means to truly live, is to go out, follow your passions, and throw caution to the wind, and allow the experience to unfold. However it's going to unfold. At the end of it, you're going to be okay either way. So these failures that I've experienced in my life have been the thing, without these failures, I wouldn't be here today. I absolutely guarantee you I wouldn't be here today without those failures, because of something that, I had to deal with, in this last year, which was surviving cancer. And I absolutely 100% wouldn't be here today without all the lessons that I learned previously.
Hey guys, real quick break from the interview. Just want to take a second to again recognize Nick and the whole team at BPN, Bear Performance Nutrition, for coming on board as one of our proud new sponsors of the podcast here on EverForward Radio. When looking at the lineup of Bear Performance Nutrition supplements, you are going to get quality first and just an amazing lineup of customer service after that. They have everything you need from pre-workouts, whey protein, amino acids, BCAAs, if you will, creatine, a pump product, a thermo-focused product, and even as of late, a incredible greens superfood. So whether you're looking to build muscle, improve performance, or a weight loss goal, BPN has you covered. And what we're going to do is allow you to get all of your supplements at a great discount. You can use EverForward at checkout at bpnsubs.com. You're going to get 10% off your entire purchase. You can use it once, twice, whenever, every month, every week, however often you go through your supplements. Head back to bpnsubs.com, use EverForward at checkout. You're going to save 10% off of everything. That is bpnsupps.com. Robbie, I definitely want to shift gears and bring that up because I know your story of diagnosis of cancer and going about it and treating it in your own way is a huge part of who you are and your truth and your origin story. But I have to ask you a question before we jump into that. Do you have my computer wiretapped? Because this is so ironic that you're talking about this fear and keeping people back holding people back. Right before we were recording, I was doing what I call my Ever Forward Friday episodes. Usually about once a month, I'll do kind of a quick 5 to 8 minute standalone podcast episode as a bonus. And it was all about fear. And I was saying that fear is what separates what we want to do versus what we should do, and why we get so comfortable in staying in what we should do because of fear. Fear is this safe little buffer between doing what we should versus doing what we really want to do. It's perfect timing, man. Thank you so much for kind of just echoing, I guess, whatever lesson I was supposed to learn in that.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, I think a lot of people out there listening struggle with this in their own way. I always thought I was fearless, because I did all these crazy adventures. I've jumped out of planes and I've climbed big mountains in the Himalayas. And, I just thought I was fearless. But, when I got sick, I realized how much fear I really had within me. And it's these other fears, these ones that go unnoticed. Or maybe these are the fears that we push away in our lives. Some of us have, we all have different kinds of fears, but really there's only one fear. I mean, fear is fear, and it's just colored by all these different kinds. Some people have a fear of speaking. Some people have a fear of, social contact or.
It's just all a different mask.
It's a different mask. Yeah. And, but there's only one fear, fear is fear. Who said that? The famous quote, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And that is a beautiful, amazing quote when you unpack it. Because the moment that you step towards the fear, it begins to dissolve. Because ultimately this kind of fear, this kind of emotional kind of fear is an illusion, and it's completely empty, and you look back at these things that you did in your life that maybe you were afraid to do, and you're no longer afraid to do those things, so when you start to really do this more often, the whole concept of fear begins to completely break down. And, this is something that I experienced very, very deeply and profoundly in my journey towards healing cancer.
No, I think what you're describing, what I'm just kind of imagining, is an external versus an internal fear. All along in hearing your stories of adventures and facing the elements and the wilderness, those are all external forces. Those are all things that you willingly stepped out and faced. We know that what you're just explaining is that fear is fear is fear is fear, but this external fear staring you in the face and then accepting that, saying, yes, I challenge this, I accept this, versus that internal fear, something that you really can't control, that this cancer, this isn't you stepping out at the base of a mountain and, challenging it to climb up. This is something that has challenged you. So maybe before you came to that realization, now on the other side and in recovery, which is amazing, but what was it like to have this internal challenge when you were so used to having things in front of you that you accepted?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's nothing like facing your own mortality, and there is a difference between the physical fear and the emotional fear. I mean, I always say, if you find yourself getting chased by a lion, turn around and run the other way. That's real. That's real fear, and that's kind of the lizard brain. And
words of wisdom to live by, everybody. Run away from the starving lion chasing you down.
Yeah, absolutely. But, it's the emotional fears that we can change, and I won't say it's about overcoming fear. For me, it's more of a surrendering. It's more of a letting go into fear. And there's a lot of things involved in how these fears develop. Sometimes, these fears develop out of a lack of self-worth. Sometimes these fears develop out of self-doubt, all kinds of things. So When I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer and given a 4% chance of survival, that was like facing down the barrel of a gun, and really facing this story in my mind of facing death. And through all the experiences in my life, overcoming adversity and really, trying to, learn how to lean into my fears a little bit more. I found that I really had all the tools that I needed to really embrace this journey. I think one of the first things I said, I brought my family together and all my friends together, and I looked them all. I looked at them and all, and I just said, cancer's a story. Cancer's a story in the mind. I mean, it's funny because you hear the word cancer, and everybody goes to the same place. They all go to death. When they hear the word cancer, they think death. And I don't know where that comes from. It's embedded in our consciousness somehow. And somehow I recognized right away that was a story in my mind. It was an illusion, and it was based in fear. So this is what happens. You get that diagnosis, and it's shocking. I mean, you go into shock, literally. And for me, I recognized that, because of all the things that I had done in my life. I recognized what was happening to me. So I recognized that I needed to move through that shock. So, I told my friends and family, I'm like, this is a story in my mind, and I can rewrite the story. I can change this story. So I really took on cancer in this completely different way. A lot of people were saying, oh, you should go do chemo and you should do radiation and this and that. And I said, I'm not feeling like that's my path. I'm feeling like this is more about, changing my mind.
Yeah, you didn't take the normal path. You went about it your own way and completely challenged it, which I think is perfect for knowing you and everything you've faced and overcome. You took it on in your own way. How did you go about beating cancer in a seemingly different than the norm way?
So I think this is where I would say the concept of surrender comes in. And I think what it was surrendering completely and utterly into the unknown. It was a time in my life where I had no idea what was going to happen, and I had to embrace the fact that in fact I think the statement that I used to my friends and family was, the cancer could kill me, but along the way, it's going to heal me. And so I think the thing that really drove me was, what does cancer have to teach me? If I am going to go, I want to go, in the most gracious and content way possible. So I wanted to learn what it was this cancer was teaching me. And so, for me, it was about, stepping into fear and overcoming self-doubt and reclaiming self-worth and finding, a little bit more compassion in my life and really opening my heart more and, bringing in more of a positive mindset into my life. And so, it was about raising the vibration, raising the energy and just, getting to a point where that story that cancer is going to kill me, that story could no longer operate within my mind. I wanted to envision myself completely healed, completely happy and living my life. And that's the story I envisioned from day one.
Rob, what would you maybe say to someone listening right now who is facing something similar, whether it's as extreme as cancer or a terminal illness or something as losing their job or their significant other leaving them? How do we face this and change the story?
I believe, we are creators. We are here to, like I described the world as kind of a playground before. And, I think human beings are creators, and they're capable of manifesting things in this reality. And I think it all starts in the mind. I think our thoughts, we are talking to ourselves in our mind constantly. And I think, everything in our life begins with our thoughts. And sometimes our thoughts aren't our own. Sometimes a lot of our thoughts are being driven by the outer world. It's being driven by, our workplace and the news media and politicians and doctors and family and friends. And, so I spend an awful lot of time kind of going into myself and really kind of drowning out all that noise, because I just wanted to be with my own thoughts and understand, how am I thinking? How am I creating and manifesting this story? Because somehow I got here to this place. Somehow I manifested this situation. Cancer is a very complex illness, and it doesn't just come from one thing. It is
it's in us at all times. Absolutely. I mean, cancer in and of itself is something that the human body goes through and gets rid of on a daily basis. And you're right. It's this compounding effect of positive and negative vibrations, positive and negative nutrition and mentality and stress that just really makes the decision for us based upon the kind of life we're living and our thoughts that become emotions and emotions that become behaviors that can make or break your chances of getting it and even getting on the other side of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, if I was going to give somebody one piece of advice, I would say, whatever story you want to create in your life, believe that you can make that happen. Believe that you can manifest that. And, belief is something that I've learned a lot about in this last year dealing with cancer. And, there was a moment where, my doctor called me and he said, Rob, the cancer is getting worse, and I want you to consider getting chemo. I had been taking kind of a targeted therapy type of drug, and the doctor was indicating that the cancer was getting worse, and he wanted me to go for chemo. So I was kind of walking these parallel paths where I was doing a fully more holistic path, doing nutrition and exercise and detox and supplementation and, kind of the works on that side. I mean, that was the bulk of my protocol, and I was kind of working with an oncologist on a certain level, to monitor my condition. And I went hiking up through the snow one day, and I was hiking to the top of this mountain, and at this time, I had tubes coming out of my chest, and there was basically a liter of liquid that I was draining from my lung on a daily basis. And but I could walk, and I could hike a little bit. So I went on this hike, and I got to the top of this little mountain near my house in Colorado, and I had a vision. Like it was happening right in front of me. And it was a vision of me guiding a group of people up a stone path above Machu Picchu in Peru. And as it turns out, I had a trip coming up that next April with 20 people to take them to Machu Picchu. And at that moment, I decided. I made a choice. I made a choice and said, if I am going to go, I'm going to go out, fighting for my dream and following my passion in life. And, my passion is really sharing the outdoors and these adventures with people, because I think they're life changing. They're transformational. So I just set about trying to train for the next 4 months, and one foot in front of the other, and pretty soon I was hiking like 35 miles a week, and hiking up and down these mountains right by my house, and
while still battling cancer.
Yeah. I mean, I had maybe 2 gears. I couldn't run. My breath was short, and kind of interesting. Within maybe 2 or 3 weeks of me making that decision, I woke up one morning and the tubes in my chest started coming out by themselves. And I went down to the hospital. I had the tubes removed, and after that, the pleural effusion in my lungs completely stopped.
No way.
Yeah. And, a pleural effusion, once you get a pleural effusion in your lung, the doctor's kind of, that's pretty bad. I don't think you're going to make it. They kind of write you off. And so miraculously, this thing stops, and I just start hiking. I just start doing what I know, which is training. I was an athlete. And 4 months later, I went down to Peru, and I found myself welcoming 20 Kiwis from New Zealand on this incredible 2-week trip to Machu Picchu. And, I completely forgot I had cancer for 2 weeks. It was definitely hard. I was still, obviously I was still sick, but I was living my life. I just decided I was going to do this and just go out and live my life. And we got to Machu Picchu, and we hiked up to the top of Mount Machu Picchu, up this stone path, and we're sitting on top of this mountain, and the clouds clear, and there's Machu Picchu below me, and that exact vision that I saw on a mountain in Colorado was there in front of me in that moment.
How much more rewarding was that summit, Rob? How much more rewarding was that, in that your vision came to life? You had this clarity around what you still had left in the gas tank of what you needed to do before, like you said, if you were going to go. But then what was it like in that experience right there to summit that mountain, to lead these other people in a way that you've done so many other times before? How was that different?
It was so rewarding for me because that summit wasn't for me. That summit was for the group of people that I guided there. It was so. I was so grateful just to be looking across at them and seeing how much they were enjoying themselves, and the challenge of making it through the whole 2-week trek through the mountains. It was just so rewarding for me to see them all accomplish something that some of them didn't think that they might be able to do.
Did they think you were going to make it? Did they think that their navigator, their guide was going to be able to summit this mountain? Were they aware of what you were going through at the time?
They weren't aware of it until later that day.
Okay.
In fact, I told them when we were at Machu Picchu, and yeah.
What an ace up the sleeve, man! I can't imagine getting to the top of an adventure like that, and then my guide being like, "Oh yeah, by the way, I've been battling cancer for the past 4 or 5 months," and you're like, "Man, I don't feel bad for complaining about anything else anymore."
Yeah, it was rewarding to be able to do that trip, and it turns out it was incredibly healing. I came back from Peru, and a couple weeks later, I got a scan. And the scan said that the tumor in my lung had almost entirely disappeared.
Awesome. Awesome.
So it seems strange. You hear stories like this, where people just, they forgot they had cancer and they went out and they just lived their life and all of a sudden they were healed. Not many people would choose to take the path that I took. But for some reason, the combination of really just tuning in to my own intuition, my own heart, following my own passion, and then really stepping into that fear and surrendering to that fear, surrendering to that unknown, and obliterating the story that just because the doctors gave me a 4% chance of living, that's what was going to happen. I absolutely from day one believed that I was that 4%. And, today I'm out running and I'm mountain biking and I'm really just going out and living my life.
That's incredible, Rob. I think your story is one that really resonates to the origin of what Everforward Radio and what Everforward as a brand is all about. Like I was telling you, these two words we picked up from our deceased father, who from the moment he was diagnosed with his terminal illness, Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, to the day he passed about 18 months later, you never saw anything other in his eyes than the story he chose of, I'm making this my own. I accept what has been dealt to me, and I'm not going to let this negative spin, this negative connotation take over whatever days I have left. And I'm sure as hell not going to let it transgress into those around me. I'm going to choose my own story. I'm going to live it every day how I want. So I think yours definitely is something that hits close to home for Everforward as a whole, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's an awesome mantra, and it seems very, very similar to what I've worked out through my own adversity.
Yeah, and speaking of, what about Everforward? Now that you kind of know the origin, and we've learned about your story and your adversities and how you've turned them into your advantages. How does your story and everything that you stand for, and whether you're speaking to someone, coaching someone, or leading a group up a mountain, how does your story help others live a life Everforward?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, I'm really just getting out and trying to share my story because I think the world needs inspiration. I think the world needs hope. And the world needs heroes. And people who've gone out and stepped into their fear, stepped into their adversity, and learned something valuable. And so, what I do with clients, whether I'm coaching them, whether I'm out on a trip, is I work with them on the techniques that I've learned over 20 years. I use visualization, and I use mindfulness and meditation, and I kind of put it into this whole program about how do you rewrite your story and really manifest the life that you want to live. Really it's about being of service to people. And I think my story has the ability to help people in overcoming the challenges and adversity that they had in their lives.
No doubt. Well, I can't wait to link all of your adventures and your bio and your information in the show notes below. I really think anyone who resonates with me and the message of Everforward are definitely going to find value in your content and your speaking engagements and your adventure programs. It's been incredible getting to know you a little bit more here, Rob.
Thanks so much, Chase. And if you want to learn more about what I do and what I offer, you can head to my website at Awaken Adventures /everforward, and you can link up with me on social media and see all of my offerings there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What maybe before we head out here, what's your next adventure? What are you training for or shooting for next?
I am training for, we're going to go back to Peru in June, but the next trip I'm going to the Philippines to go on an adventure sailing trip. And it's a little bit more of a chill trip, but
you need those from time to time.
Absolutely, we're gonna have some adventure down in the Philippines and enjoy the water, enjoy the beach, and the amazing culture down there.
Beautiful, beautiful, Rob. Thank you again so much for your time. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and thank you for opening up and sharing your story here on Everforward Radio.
Thanks so much, Chase.
Thank you all so much for joining me again this week. I truly hope that you have enjoyed this episode and its message. If you have found value in Everforward Radio, I would greatly appreciate you subscribing to the podcast, as well as taking just a few seconds and leaving it a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. This is the best way to make sure our message continues to reach others. Thanks again, and I hope that this content helps you live a life ever forward.